Thank you all for being here. It's good to see you. I'm excited to all be together again and looking forward to our conversation with City Manager Miguel Márquez coming up in a few minutes. We're trying something different with questions tonight. So if you have questions, we'll have student ambassadors walking around. If you'll write down the questions, they're just going to bring them up and we're going to kind of work them into the conversation as we go and see how that goes. But before we do that, we are blessed and honored to be here at a beloved institution in District 7, Pasadena City College. And we have with us today the president of Pasadena City College, Dr. Jose Gomez. Dr. Gomez, he doesn't want me to do an introduction. It's just going to be so short, Jose. Jose is a longtime friend of mine. Our kids, who are grown men now, were in kindergarten together. So we've known each other a long time. Before Jose came to PCC in 2023, a little over 2 years ago, he was the provost and chief of operations and vice president and 16 other titles at Cal State LA. And then before that, he was there 13 years and then spent 15 years in the Senate working on education policy. So he has education cred. I know they are pleased to have him here at PCC, and I am honored to introduce him to you, Dr. Jose Gomez.
Thank you, Jason, for that kind introduction. I am not here alone, though. I am also here with another resident of our district, a longtime resident, I think probably longer than me. Our trustee for this area is here. Tammy Silver, Trustee Tammy Silver, can you say hello? And also Caroline Lee is also here from my office. And I'm just here to welcome you to Pasadena City College, the greatest college in the universe, in the best city council district in the universe, with the finest city council member in the universe, Jason Lyon. And by the way, I should say I can say this because earlier today I was at Caltech and they did an experiment and they proved that that was all true. So, but anyway, we are so happy to have you here at PCC. PCC has been here for 100 years. 100 years. And we've been here 100 years at really as really the anchor of Pasadena in this region. And I think it's really symbolic that we are on Colorado Boulevard, which is one of the most famous boulevards in the world, that happens to be on Route 66, which is probably the most famous highway in the country, which is also going to be celebrating its 100-year anniversary. And for all of this time, in this district, District 7, PCC has been part of the community, serving as an anchor and really like an oak tree with roots into the community. But we have been so successful and have lasted so long because of you, the great community that has supported Pasadena City College. One of the things that you've probably noticed recently as you've driven on Route 66 down Colorado is our recently refurbished mirror pools. When I came to PCC, the question and the comments that everyone had about PCC was, why is there no water in the mirror pools? Why is it cracked? Why is it falling apart? I remember when I was a kid, I used to go in there and play with my boats, and my dad used to take me there. Well, if you go by there now, they have been completely refurbished. And what's so significant about that isn't just the fact that now it has become a place for our students and community to gather, If you go on the weekends, you will see maybe some of you that live in the neighborhood who walk your dogs here, or maybe are on campus regularly. I see the community out there on those benches. We have plugs, Wi-Fi all around. We have great umbrellas because it gets hot out there. And there are mature oak trees that are also out there. But that space to me has always been really symbolic, because it's kind of the walkway to one of the other iconic sort of pieces of Pasadena history, which is our main building, which was actually, the campus has been here since 1924. But that building and most of the campus actually had to come down during the earthquake of 1933, the Long Beach earthquake, which caused significant damage to the institution. Everything had to come down except for one thing on this campus. And as you walk up that, you go down the mirror pools and up those stairs, and you see those beautiful lanterns, which I call the lanterns of knowledge, right? It's like sort of the stairway to opportunity. And you go inside the building, there is a 2,000-seat auditorium. Most of you have probably been in there at some point. If you've been here in Pasadena for a long time, you probably remember that it was, it needed significant repair. The seats were falling apart. It really wasn't what it should be. Well, that entire auditorium has also been refurbished, including the stage. And immediately after the 1933 earthquake, the only thing that was kept intact was that stage. And they used it for storage space. And so now we have these two important pieces of Pasadena history and Pasadena City College history that have been completely restored. And I just tell you that story because we have encountered so much challenge, and there's just been so much that we as a community here in Pasadena and the region have had to deal with after the fires. And yet you can see these glimmers of hope, right, where the community is rebuilding. And PCC has dealt with tragedy before. We have seen devastation. We have seen this complete campus go down. We had to teach on the lawn on Colorado for 2 years in tents. And yet this community was resilient. This was the 1930s. This was during the Great Depression, and you all chose to invest in this college during that time, and you chose to invest in us recently, and I know that you'll choose to invest with us in the future. So I want to thank you for being a part of, who we are. You are PCC. We're all PCC. Can I see a show of hands of anyone that has attended PCC or has had a family member or friend attend PCC? Right? I mean, we're everywhere. And so thank you so much for being here. I do want to just say something really quick about our next speaker, Miguel. I've had a opportunity to work with him now for 2 years, and I don't think I have met a more devoted civic leader than Miguel. He picks up the phone when you need him. He cares about this place almost as much as we do. I mean, frankly, he has been a tireless leader for this community, and I really appreciate everything that you do for Pasadena City College, and the fact that you are open to new ideas, you are innovative, you listen, and I'm just so happy that you're here at PCC after such an incredibly accomplished professional life and career that we've got you here. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for being here at PCC. You're welcome here anytime. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Pasadena is a city manager city, which means that it is primarily run on the day-to-day basis by staff who's headed up by the city manager. All of the city departments are under the city manager, and the city manager answers to the city council, which is a part-time organization of 8 individuals, 7 council members and the mayor. And we set policy for the city, but the implementation and the kind of day-to-day activities of the city are the city manager's role. So it's a hugely important position in our city. And Miguel's in charge of making sure the trains are all on the track and making sure the city council, doesn't take them off the track. So before we start talking about what's happening in the city, you had kind of a long and fascinating road professionally to our city. And so I just wanted to ask you to kind of run through, you don't have to do your whole resume, but how you got here and where you stopped along the way.
Sure, happy to do that. And good evening to everybody. It's very nice to be here. Thank you, Dr. Gomez, for those kind words. And I'll mention a few things about community college and my background. But, I thought best way to describe this, because you're right, I kind of feel like I've had the Forrest Gump of educational and professional careers, because I'm kind of just making it up, and it just kind of happens to happen in interesting and fun ways. But I think I'm going to break it up into 4 quick parts. First part, 0 to 18. I'm a first-generation American. My parents are from Mexico, a state called Zacatecas in the central part of Mexico. They came to this country in the 60s, early 60s. My dad had about 5 years of education, my mom 2 months. So we didn't have a lot. There's a lot that implies, including poverty and all that kind of stuff. But thankfully, I was a Head Start kid. If you're familiar with Head Start, helps you get ahead and learn some English before you go to kindergarten. Went to school, had some big challenges. 2 quick things. I learned how to swim at Cosumnes River College, which is a community college out in Sacramento. So that's a plug for community colleges. And then when I was in high school, my high school wasn't great, and I wanted to learn chemistry, so I went to Sacramento City College. So I went to 2 colleges. That's the start. Then I go to college, and I had the blessings of having a lot of support. I got to go to Stanford University for college, Harvard for grad school, and UC Berkeley for law school. It's a whole separate part of my life that's very different from the first 18 years. Then I became a lawyer, and I have 2 parts of my professional career. First is being a lawyer, and I found after I went through that journey that pretty much I had a law degree in debt. That's all I had to my name. So I said, what the heck am I going to do now? So I went to what they call a white shoe law firm, and was working in the high-tech space and doing a lot of interesting work in the Silicon Valley, right when, just prior to the dot-com bust that happened in 2001. I was there from 1996 to 98, and was doing great work, but at some point realized that the whole point between my growing up experience and going to school was I wanted to give back to community, and found that I was really turning millionaires into billionaires. And that wasn't really feeding my soul. So I made a radical switch a couple years into law practice, went to the county of San Mateo. If you're unfamiliar, counties do a lot of safety net services, and really thrived in that environment because it really spoke to what I'm about. Became both sort of a school lawyer, and among one more community college tie, I was the general counsel to the San Mateo County Community College District. So I got a bunch of community college in me. And went from San Mateo County to San Francisco, City and County San Francisco, to the school district in San Francisco. I was the general counsel for San Francisco Unified. And then I came down to Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County is kind of the Silicon Valley, and was the chief legal officer for Santa Clara County. That then got the attention. We did some things, so I'll skip that part, but that got the attention of Governor Brown when he was elected in 2010. And it wasn't my idea, like I said, Forrest Gump. He called me and he said, hey, essentially it's a long process, but do you want to serve on the Court of Appeal and be what they call an associate justice? And I said, let's look at that. We went through the process. He named me in his second go-around, because he was governor, I think, in the 70s, and then again in starting in 2010 or 2011 is when he took office. In 2012, he named me to be an associate justice on the 6th District Court of Appeal, and I did that for 4 years. Then realized that a big part of that work is putting lots of people or affirming their 25 to life sentence in prison. And I realized that's really not what I want to do for the rest of my career. And so I came back to the County of Santa Clara, but this time in a non-legal role as Chief Operating Officer, and did that for 6 years, including through COVID. And if you're unfamiliar, mostly public health departments reside in counties, not cities. There's 3 exceptions: Berkeley, Pasadena, and Long Beach, but otherwise it's done by county, so we had to deal with COVID. But then I have extended family down here in Southern California, so I wanted to come down pretty badly and was just keeping an eye open, and I looked at Pasadena, I looked at everything about it. It had a public health department, it had its own what's called a continuum of care, which is something that's done to help get money from HUD and federal government to bring to try and help solve housing and homelessness issues, mostly homelessness. And so I put my name in. I was blessed that they selected me, and I came down here in 2022, and I've been your city manager now for a little more than 3 years. So kind of a roundabout way, but.
Right. So why so slack? True fact, in 2004, the city and county of San Francisco, you may recall, decided to start issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. Before we had same-sex marriage in California, and my husband and I were one of the couples who got married the first couple of days in San Francisco. Shortly after he came here, that came up with Miguel, and Miguel told me he's the person who wrote me to let me know that the California Supreme Court had invalidated our marriages. So there's that. But that actually led to the case that ended up establishing marriage in California.
And if I may, I let you know that an idea I came up with, because I had just started in San Francisco, everyone was so bummed out about that decision. They're like, who's going to write the letter to the 4,800 odd couples that or something like that, I don't remember the number, that were married? And they say, well, let's get the new guy. So it was my assignment. But I came up, I said, let's ask them to donate, because we were required to return the fees. And I said, why don't we ask them to donate the fees to the city and call what we called the Same-Sex Marriage Litigation Fund. And we did that. We got $700,000 from people that contributed. Maybe you did too.
We did.
And that helped make the case in the federal court that ended up legalizing same-sex marriage in California.
It did. So a lot of activity in your career before you come to Pasadena in 2022, and then basically nothing's happening here for the last few years, right? How's it been for the 3 years you've been here so far?
It's been incredibly busy for a variety of reasons. I think one, when I got here, even though it was August 29th of 2022, we were still trying to, pick ourselves up from COVID. It's hard to remember back then, but, I think for me, a big part of what that meant is a lot of our executive staff had turned over. I think it was just that really hard time where people they'd kind of stuck it out as long as they could during COVID, and then they left. In Pasadena, we have 17 departments, and the city council appoints the department heads for 3 of them: the city clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager. And then in turn, the city manager appoints the other 14 department heads. And, I've been here a little more than 3 years, and I've already appointed 11 of the 14, to give you a sense of the turnover that happened. And just
one
now,
of them twice, right? In
yes,
Water and Power.
The general manager of Water and Power. And we have only one opening right now. It's the director of finance, and we're in process to appoint. When I appoint that person, it'll be 12 out of 14. And then on my own individual staff, to get my work done, I have 3 assistant city managers, a deputy city manager, and an assistant to the city manager. So that's 5 people, and I've appointed 4 of the 5. So again, you can see in the 3 years, it's really a new team. It's not to say everybody came from elsewhere. It was a lot of moving around, because we are so blessed with our, not just executives, but with our entire staff here in Pasadena. So there was just a lot of good people to promote.
And with all that turnover, I will say from my experience, their morale is great in the city. But also, there's such cohesive leadership. And in my observation, the city can often become very siloed in the different departments and the functions not talking to each other, as happens in a lot of large organizations. And I think under your leadership, the communication among and between the departments has been extraordinary. Have you found that to be true?
I have, and maybe I can crystallize it with one good example. Water and Power is a big agency that, it's about 1/3 of the city's revenues. I don't think it adds 1/3 of the employees, but it's a lot of the revenues. And they do a lot of work. So they were going to do some retrenching work and some undergrounding work on Fair Oaks. And thankfully, we've built this, let's not work in silos, let's work together. But they had contracted with somebody. They were going to take an agenda report to the council to get approval. And, there's a thing called a PCI, which is the Pavement Condition Index. It's something we've been working to get better and higher here in Pasadena. We deserve the best roads, or at least better ones than we have. You can see some potholes and some other things. So we're working on that. And this particular road had a PCI of 57. So they were going to spend...
Out of 100.
Out of 100.
It's not great.
I think they were going to spend something like $2.1 million to underground and just leave it as it was with the same PCI of 57. When the director of public works said, wait, what are you doing? You could partner with me. We could do this in a whole different way. And we could end up getting a PCI of 100, a brand new street that would be smooth. And, working together, they said, let's do it. And so we asked the council to reject the bids. They did. We went back out under this new plan that was done with 2 people collaborating with different areas of expertise, and we ended up getting a bid at $1.6 million. So we saved $500,000, and we get a road at 100 PCI instead of 57. So I just use that as one example of how that cross-departmental collaboration really brings value to your tax dollars.
There was coordination on Glen Arm, too. I smiled when he started that story because I was looking for Pam, because this is a pet peeve of both of ours, the lack of communication between those 2 departments in particular on road work, and they are doing such a better job of planning to do their work together. So thank you for that. All right, well, let's start with what's happening right now in the city. Last night, we had a city council meeting that was mostly focused on contracts about the greenways. Does anybody know? Have you heard about the greenways? A couple of people? So greenways, about 10 years ago now, the Department of Transportation identified 4 north-south streets in the city out of our 50-something north-south streets that are good candidates for reduction in vehicle volumes and speeds to make them friendlier to pedestrians and to bicyclists of all ages. So ideally, our kids could be out biking, people who like to commute by bikes could use those streets. Because what we're finding is, while we have a couple of major bike lanes in the city, we really don't have a comprehensive network of bike lanes to let people get around the city. And what we hear over and over again in surveys is that I would like to bike, but I don't really feel safe. And so we're trying to identify streets to make those safe. People, as it turns out, have a lot of feelings about roads. And so there were people who were happy about this proposal and not happy about this proposal. And P.S., all we're doing right now is a contract with a design professional and an outreach professional to bring up ideas for ways we might calm the traffic on these streets. We're not making any changes yet. But we had a lot of feedback about it, and I think mostly positive, and I was happy with where we're headed. Any thoughts about the greenways or where we're going next with that?
Yeah, where we're going next is we're going to have a robust public engagement process to look at, as Councilmember Lyon just said, we're not done yet. We don't have a design. We're not just implementing something. We're conceptually designing it. It's very early on in the process, and what myself, my team, were insistent upon is we need to have a client-centered design. So there's going to be a lot of engineering behind it. We got to keep people safe, but it's not worth anything if we don't have it client-centered as a design element. I think a dynamic that was a little bit troubling is people have what I call keyboard courage. So at the council meeting last night, it was very, mostly respectful and whatnot. But on the keyboard, there were some really challenging messages one way or the other, just to the extreme. And I think one member of the council summed it up by saying the problem is we're talking past each other and not with each other about what's the right path forward. The truth is there's something like 28 streets that cross the Highway 210, and this is looking possibly at some modifications to 4 of them. where they're the least traveled so that you can make out a multimodal city. So it's actually pretty modest what we're looking at. We're not trying to change the whole world here, but to see the reaction was a little bit concerning. But we are committed to a robust public engagement process. I encourage you to get involved and to express your views, and we'll try to get to the right balance for making it, as you said, a city where you can get anywhere you need to get to on bike and walking and a scooter and everything that multimodal means. Yep, exactly.
And that's the way we're ultimately gonna manage traffic, right? Is by getting some people out of their cars, even at the margins. We don't all have to get out of our cars all the time, but if we can make it so that some people can when they want to, it'll help lighten the burden with traffic, we believe. We'll probably get to this in a minute, but you and I have talked a lot about this. You mentioned the keyboard courage and the tone of the comment. I will say I'm finding, and I know that you have found this as well, we're against the backdrop of our national politics right now. There is a phenomenon in politics in particular where every dispute is taking on a quality of an existential threat. Life in Pasadena is not going to radically change whether we implement greenways or not, but you would literally think we were coming after people on both sides. And one of the things I really want very much for our city is to calm that tension, because we're all on the same thing. We all ultimately want the same things for our cities, even if we disagree about the policy ways to get there. So we'll talk a little about what's happening with national politics in a second. On last week's agenda, we had a report that was actually a long time coming and longer back than the Eaton fire, but the fire chief, Chad Augustine, brought us his 10-year strategic plan for the fire department. And I think, again, that work was in progress before the fire, but it's certainly the urgency of that plan became clearer to us. And it's a lot. There's a lot we need to do. We need to staff, we need more vehicles, we need another whole station. 2 of our stations are desperately out of date and need to be probably taken down to the ground and rebuilt. Others need modernizing, and there's a big potential price tag on it. So thoughts on the fire plan and where we're going for the next 10 years?
Sure. I think we're so blessed to live in an old city and a historic city, but sometimes, old and historic doesn't work when you have new equipment that's much bigger and, buildings that are taller that require larger, what they call ladder trucks. Frankly, we were just talking as well about how both Councilmember Lyon and I recall ambulances that were smaller. I called it the Scooby-Doo van kind of ambulance, that kind of
Which put him
vehicle.
exactly in my generation for that reference.
And now they're much bigger, and it's because people have gotten bigger. And so, you just have to adapt. That's really true. That's why they're so big. And you have to adapt. And you go to our firehouses, and they're cramped, and they don't have quarters for both women and men. And we're trying really hard to bring more gender diversity to our firefighting force, but we don't have the infrastructure to do it. But most importantly, there's 2 that are not retrofit. And, every time there's an earthquake around Southern California, we have a lot. The first thing I do is I get a text about the earthquake happening and how firefighters are out surveying to see if there's any damage. We check that right away. So can you imagine if we lost the firehouses? So we have to retrofit them. We probably need another firehouse somewhere, and we're going to, hopefully have public engagement to talk about that. We're also getting older in Pasadena, and we have seen a rise in calls for medical help, and we want to be able to get to people as quickly as we can, because when you are in distress, when you have a medical emergency, every second literally counts. So we're probably going to have to add another ambulance. And so I think all of these things cost a fair bit of money, and we're in a place, not just Pasadena, we're actually doing very well compared to others. And I'm pleased to report that we're fiscally stable, but that's not to say that we don't have fiscal constraints that wouldn't allow us to grow in the ways we need to grow. And in particular, where you have now extreme weather events. That's really what we saw in January. It wasn't about water. And I kind of wrote about this in one of my newsletters. Again, let me date myself, but it was about my favorite band from the 70s and 80s called Earth, Wind, and Fire. But it really was about wind and fire. And, I still recall my fire chief calling me and telling me, we have winds about 100 mile an hour and we've lost air support. And I knew then we were going to be in trouble. And he talked about a 2 to 3 mile, what they call ember cast. And he talked about relative humidity at 7%. And he talked about seeing hundreds of spot fires as he was coming from the front lines back to our emergency operations center. So we all saw what can happen. And I think we need to be prepared. So one thing that's included in this 10-year plan, it's actually not just fire we're looking at, but parks, because we want to do weed abatement year round. We need to really get rid of those weeds, get rid of the fuel that can catch fire and really present incredible challenges. So we look forward to future discussions. I think, to put it simply, what we're going to do is go to public safety and have a big open and process where you all are invited to participate, to talk about what do we need. You know, we have some ideas that we've presented, but I think public safety will take that up in earnest.
That's the Council's Public Safety Committee.
Yep. And then we're going to go next to the Finance Committee to say, okay, how do we finance it? But that'll be in the coming months. And I think in today's world, really, there's certainly not enough revenues. We're struggling just to make ends meet now. So we likely will have to ask the voters for support, but we think keeping you all safe, being a fire-ready Pasadena, is something we hope to get support on.
The Chief Augustine happens to live in our district, and after the fire, we talked about, and we talked a little bit about this at the last district meeting, if you were there, but how this, maybe it was a once-in-a-century event, except for we had similar winds 10 years ago, but the fire department didn't know what happened could happen. The distance that the embers flew, the ember cast being miles at a time, District 7 was the only district in the city that was not directly affected by the fire. Never had evacuation warnings, never lost water, never had anyone evacuate. But we could. That fire, one switch of the wind could have brought it all the way down into the city, and then we're in a situation like we've never seen before since the San Francisco fire, with an urban fire. So it's critically important for all of our city that we figure out a way to invest in this, but it's a big dilemma.
If you permit me, one other piece, we can't forget about Public Works. They did an incredible job throughout this. And so District 7 in particular, the wind knocked down a lot of trees. You may recall how quickly we picked. I mean, the city's actually bigger than you think when you have to pick up tree parts on every street. But they created a website, you saw the progress, and we got it, within 2 or 3 weeks, it was all cleaned up. And immediately, I think all the big pieces were out so you could use the roads.
Greg DeVink, who's now the head of Public Works, started when? Before the fire?
I think it was like December 2nd.
Yeah, it was like weeks before. He was like, hey, I don't know your name, to his staff people, but could you go clean up these trees? I mean, he didn't, and it was incredible, I thought.
And it's a lot of work on Public Works to do the parade. When you have 800,000 people come to see and you have everybody, they make a mess. I challenge you to drive down Colorado at 7 a.m. the next morning, because what you'll see is I have video of it, how clean it is. That's Greg and his staff, and he came from the city of San Gabriel, which is much smaller. So he came here, less than 4 weeks later, he was cleaning up after the parade, and just 1 week after that was cleaning up after a windstorm.
So that's the fire side of public safety. Let's talk a little bit about police. Here in District 7, we had a couple of spikes this year in property crime. We are statistically an incredibly safe city. Violent crime is very, very low, and I'm just superstitious enough to knock on that wood. But we have property crime, and we see it in our district a fair amount. Robberies and burglaries. We just had Sergeant Klotz speak at my monthly coffee Saturday, and he corrected me because I reversed robbery and burglary. So robbery is when your person gets robbed. Burglary is when property is broken into. They can both happen in one event, but they're two different things. We've had more burglaries than robberies, but I would say they're on top of it. Have you talked to the chief about it at all? Pam and I met with the chief and deputy chief last week about this. But
yeah, I meet with our police chief. I think it's twice a month, and we talk about all of these issues, and they're certainly on it and are using the best technology we can. Technology is incredibly important as a tool, and we're getting our arms around some of these challenges. I do want to say something about the the lack of violent crime that we're blessed to have. And you know what?
Yeah.
Let me do the same thing.
Just in case.
But it's not by accident, right? It's not just a fluke. We do have gangs in Pasadena. We do have to address them, and we've been addressing them successfully, not through the law enforcement channel, frankly, but through public health. And what I mean by that is public health had what they call a CalVIP grant, which is California, I think it's Violence Interruption Services or Intervention Services or program, something like that. But on top of that, we made a request from a variety of grant makers and got money as well. And we have GOVIS, which is Gang Outreach and Violence Interruption Services. Mm-hmm. And we bring a public health lens to try and talk to people when there's a spark of risk of gang violence. And I'm pleased to say, I think now we're going on 2 years that we haven't had a gang homicide. And we used to have them with some level of frequency in Pasadena. So much so that we lost our CalVIP grant. It's the way the state thinks. They look and they say, oh, you don't have a problem anymore. You don't need the money. We're going to go give it to someone who does. That makes some sense. But that really pushed on us to say, well, wait a minute. We saw success. Do we want to go back to what we had so we can get the money, or do we just want to solve it? So we've been able to find different funding to keep GOVIS going. And I'm pleased to say we're still, violent crime is down. Again, it's intentional. It's not by accident, and we'll keep at it.
And again, that having gang peace for 2+ years has been rare in Pasadena. So maybe knock again. On the property crime front, I'm happy to say that Pasadena police have captured most of the suspects who've committed crimes in our community. We had a couple of spates that were committed by specific individuals, and we captured them, mostly captured because of doorbell cams. So I can't encourage you enough. If you're at all a technology adopter, they are very helpful. Because as Sergeant Klotz pointed out, there's a funny thing when there's a camera, people look in them, including criminals who are there to rob your house. So there's a camera up on the eve of your house, and they're like this. And we get fantastic footage of them and catch them. So that's mostly how we've caught everyone who's been in the neighborhood. Also, if you see something, say something. If something seems off to you, it probably is. Call the police non-emergency line and just let them know. They record it. They keep track of it. If they hear 3 or 4 times that white Hyundai was cruising back and forth on blocks in Madison Heights, for example, that's a signal to them that they need to keep an eye out, or we need to send patrol out to go and just say, like, hey, why are you driving back and forth up and down the street? Which is a big deterrent.
100% agree with that, and would say if it's urgent, of course call 911. Right, that's the dispatch center. They'll get someone out as quickly as possible. But do know that if you call 911, they'll know who called, where they called from, all that. They have to. That's how that system works. Sometimes people are hesitant for a variety of reasons. They want to stay anonymous. That's okay too. Don't call 911. Call the regular line. I wish I knew the number, the non-emergency line. You can tell them, I don't feel comfortable giving my identity. I want to stay anonymous. And they'll respect that. They won't ask for your identity. They just need the information, and we'll take it from there. But again, I say that if it's an emergency, if it's urgent, please call 911. We need to get you help as soon as you need it.
The other thing we did last night was lift the Eaton Fire Public Health Emergency Declaration, which was still underway. What changes with the lifting of the declaration? I mean, we're still doing monitoring. We're still keeping an eye on air quality. Still keeping an eye on soil.
Yeah. I think what changes is, frankly, nothing. And what I mean by that is it's really, you declare an emergency because the situation at hand is beyond your resources that you have within your city. And so, it's structured in a way that first line comes to the city. We try to help you. If we can't do it, then we call the county. And I'll give you a good example. When the fire started, we had to evacuate through mutual aid many people, seniors up in the Altadena area, because their centers were on fire. We brought them to the convention center. They needed medications. They needed help right away. Thankfully, Catherine Barger, Supervisor Barger, saw that the very next day, and she said, oh, we need to help these folks. Next thing you know, you had a line of ambulances taking people to care centers, because we don't do care. The cities don't do it, the county does. And if the county can't do it, it goes to the state. If the state can't do it, it goes to the federal government. So we've been relying on that system for some time, but we looked and we said, we're at a place now where we've stabilized that we can do this just with our own city departments. So everything you said, public health will be monitoring air and soil and doing all that and reporting on it, but we can do it without having to reach out to the county or the state or the federal government. And so we ended the emergency, but we're still doing all the work.
As most of you probably know, we as a city, Pasadena avoided the worst of the fire. I mean, we lost 130 residences, so it's not tiny, but compared to the scale of the loss in Altadena, we were comparatively lucky. Our residents are on the road to rebuilding. A few weeks ago, the council decided together to waive all of the permit fees that are waivable associated with rebuilding to try to take the burden away from families who are, as you have heard over and over again, people are often underinsured without realizing it. And so but what's the status of the rebuild? Have you heard lately where we are?
I have the numbers that came to me at 4:40 p.m., so I wanted to be prepared. But first I'll say we have to really recognize how lucky we were in a way, and I'll explain why, that the debris removal, it was enormous. It normally takes 12 to 18 months, but here it was done in probably 7 or 8. The reason for that is, there was kind of President Trump and the First Lady came and they went to the Palisades. You may remember that. People there were saying, we're there telling us 12 to 18 months, and they were complaining. The president then, talked to Mayor Bass and Catherine Barger. It's taken too long, 12 to 18 months. He didn't realize at the time it was his federal employees, the EPA and FEMA, who were saying it. I think he was later informed, and then he gave, I want it done in a year's time, because he wanted to sort of save face. Well, that in order to our benefit. And, to their credit, my gosh, they did the work so quickly. It was a burden. I want to thank all of you if you had to suffer through the trucks that were going by. But I think by late July, early August, it was all done. So the debris removal is done. The one thing we should be sensitive to is there's the Maui fire, there's Paradise. That all took so much longer. They're a little bit upset that we got it done so fast, but that's the reason why that happened. We've already received, I think it's 117 housing units that we lost, and 152 structures altogether. But we received 38 rebuild applications, and that includes 5 ADUs, 6 detached garages, and 27 single-family residences. We've issued 5 permits for single-family residences and 1 for a ADU. We have 3 more that are for single-family that are approved and are ready for permit issuance. So what does that add up to? 5, 6, 8, 10. So we're maybe 10, 12% done, maybe a little bit less. But, it takes a while to get all that in place. But the fact that we have at least 10 of them done shows that we're making significant progress.
Another topic that you and I both care very much about personally, which is homelessness in our city. This year's data was kind of a mixed bag. So we count in 2 ways. We count on an annual basis everyone who touches the system, anyone who has services associated with homelessness, which in many ways is the sort of more accurate count of where we stand. We also, however, do the point-in-time count, which is what happens every year, typically in January. This year it was in February because of the fire, which happens on a night and then the following morning, where we try to capture everybody who is who's unhoused at that moment in time, to give us just a snapshot of what's happening in the winter. So the point in time count, the number was up this year. Where were we? We were at 581, up from 556. And there's some we'll get into the nuances of it. There's some interesting data in that. The annual count was down 50 from last year. So we had just over 1,047 people for 2024. So on the longer term, maybe we're making some progress in the city. We have a really robust continuum of care to try to provide services to the unhoused. But thoughts about the data we had this year and where we stand and where we need to go? Yeah,
as you mentioned, the point in time did go up slightly, but it was a strange point in time because it was supposed to happen at the end of January. We had the fires happen, and so we postponed it till I don't remember if it was February or March. So it was off on timing. And I do think we had an impact of the fires itself on the homelessness count. But you know, and we also learned in that we're getting in Pasadena a higher number of folks who are not from Pasadena but are from the region. And so we're going to try to address that with regional efforts. I think the hopeful part of the news is when I look at the numbers, I came here in 2022, but if you go back to 2011, 2012, the point in time count was around 1,200, 1,100, something like that. So we're down to 581. The year prior was 556. So we've really gone down, you know, to about half of what it used to be, you know, 14 years ago. I'm hopeful in that 2 years ago, the annual count, which I agree with you is the more important count, it's more accurate, went down 9%. And then in this latest point in time count that we announced just this year, it went down an additional 5%. So that's 14% over the 2 years. So we'll keep at it. It's a difficult issue, especially as homelessness seems to be becoming more regional, but we're going to work with our partners and really work on regional efforts. And, you know, I would say one thing, you know, there's a lot of criticism to say there's not enough housing in there. It's hard to build. It's hard to locate. It's hard to pay for. There's a lot of complexity to providing housing. We do have a fair amount, though. We've done our part. We've done a lot in Pasadena over the years. I was shocked when I first got here and was given a tour by Bill Wong, who was the former housing director, and he just did amazing work during his tenure here. And so we can't lose sight of the progress that we've made. At the same time, I think if we were to go to someone who's homeless now and say, do you need a bed, we could probably find that person a bed. There's enough resources for that. But if everybody who was here, we asked if everybody who's unhoused right now needed a bed, we don't have enough for that. Now, the truth is it takes about, on average, I'm told, 17 encounters before someone who's chronically homeless will say, okay, I'm ready, yes, because they're just not ready for housing because of various issues they have, whether it's substance use or mental health or what they call co-occurring disorders. You have to be ready to accept the services. So we don't have enough room for everybody if everybody accepted, but if today somebody says, okay, I changed my mind, it's my 17th time, I agree, I'll go and get help, we can help that person. And we're going to continue at it. And we're going to, I think the other big need that we've talked about is a year-round shelter. We do need more shelter capacity. And again, that's very hard to cite. It's very costly, but we're working on a plan for that, probably in the next couple of years.
It will make a huge difference. And I think much of the decrease in our unhoused population is attributable to a few things. Services we have available in the city, but really the intensive outreach we do. We have 2 Pasadena outreach response teams, which are a mix of a firefighter medic, a caseworker, and sometimes there's also a nurse with the team, out on the streets, just meeting people where they are and helping people access services, getting to know them, not pressuring them to take services, but meeting them again and again and again. And it's bearing fruit, but it's very slow work. On the other end of the spectrum, so those are mostly people who are chronically homeless and living on the street. On the other end of the spectrum are people who are sliding into homelessness, typically because of financial issues. And we're working very hard to get those people housed again as quickly as possible, because the longer you're out of housing, the more likely you are to become chronically unhoused. So they're 2 different ends of the spectrum and have different responses, but we're working really hard to do both. And I want to keep making my plug for a year-round shelter, which I think we need. I think all of us would like to see people not living on the streets, and to do that, we have to have a place to ask them to go. PWP. Okay, I'm trying to go through the departments because he's in charge of the whole city, but there's a lot of exciting stuff happening with power. Some is, let's start with the less good news and then we'll end with the fun stuff. But we're in the middle of a rate study. We haven't raised rates in a while. Our rates are very low compared to our peer cities, and very, very low compared to the investor-owned utilities, but we have deferred quite a bit of maintenance for quite a long time. And so the department is in the midst of a rate study now. Where do we stand with that? And when do you think we'll see recommended rates?
So one thing that we're in the middle of, as you noted, preparing the documents to bring to the council to make the presentation to talk about electric rates going forward. Just the other day, I think it might have been yesterday or even today, they announced a website called engagepwp.org, and that's going to be an engagement hub trying to have all of you give you a place to share your thoughts and your priorities. I think Councilmember Lyon really picked up on something that's very important, and that is that for too long, we've not made the investment in the infrastructure, be it on the electric side or even the water side. We have Sunset Reservoir. We are going to have to, we did not, unfortunately, collect enough money and set it aside to say, okay, here's the 80 million, we need to get a new reservoir, because you have to keep these things up. And so we're going to have to borrow money, it's a federal program, and get that reservoir so that we have clean, safe drinking water that's reliable. By the same token, we have some transmission lines where we just bought something like $40 million of copper. Copper's getting very expensive, especially when there was tariffs on it. But we have to keep up our infrastructure. So you'll see some increases. And I think we all agree, we need the lights on and the water to run when we turn on the faucet and flip the switch. And that requires appropriate infrastructure. So that's the infrastructure piece. There's good news as well, but I'll wait till you prompt me on that.
Okay. So, and we also there's also some work to be done. There was some damage related to the Eaton fire as well, which we now need to also repair. On the other end of things, almost 3 years ago now, the council set a goal of providing 100% carbon-free energy from Pasadena Water and Power by December of 2030. When we adopted the goal, Pasadena Water and Power told us we were likely to hit something like 56 or 58% carbon-free energy by 2030. We are now on track to hit somewhere between 88 and 92%. It depends how much we get off a couple of contracts. And that last 10% or so that we need to generate, we're going to need to generate internally, because we maxed out our ability for now to transmit power, external power, into the city. So I would encourage you, if you've thought about solar or solar panels, now's your moment, because the federal subsidy goes away, the tax credit goes away at the end of this year, but there is still time to do it if you want to do it. And we're working really hard with commercial partners and residences and the school district to look at bringing solar in so that we can bridge that gap. Still an audacious goal, still not entirely clear how we get to the 100%, but we are very committed. And so far, we haven't seen a big price bump from it. The energy markets all over the place have been volatile, but so far the green energy contracts are running pretty close. Now we're about to dive deeply in our optimized plan to really get to the 100%, and we'll see then where the cost impacts are. But thoughts on the goal?
Yeah, I think if for those who care, I would, and want to learn more, I urge you to go do a Google search for Pasadena Water and Power Clean Energy Tracker. And they have a whole website that talks about where we are in real time. And so I looked at it just before I came here. And, there's a variety of ways to measure carbon free. Yeah. But there's a state has a goal for all of the state to essentially go, I would call it carbon neutral by 2045. And we're bound by that. We have to do that. But I'm pleased to report that today we're at 97%, I think it is. Is on the state metric. On the state and target. We'll get to 100% sometime in 2028. So we're going to be there 17 years early. And I think that speaks so highly. When we go to conferences, you hear a whole bunch of other utilities say, there's no way we can make that goal in 2045. And I say, well, we're going to do it in 2028. And I think that's a big part of why we're working so hard, is we want to be that model to show other people we can do it. We're holding ourselves to a higher standard, and that's going to be carbon-free sourcing and on an hourly metric. And by 2028, between what we've already done and what we've have in process and trying to procure, we're going to be at 87% by 2028. Okay. Yeah, that's getting close, 87%. The 13%, the rest of that 10%, as you said, is going to be very difficult. It has to do with, days when there's cloud cover and no wind, and, for some reason it's hot, so everybody's using a lot of electricity. Then what do? You don't want to have to buy twice as much energy as you need just to make sure people's lights don't go out, because then that costs money and that costs high rates. So we're trying to figure that out. I think we have what we call a waypoint. So we have a path through to 2028. We're hopeful that new technologies emerge, and we can have that discussion one more time with the council to say, okay, in 2028, how do we get to 2030 and get to 100%? Here's the latest technologies. Let's find a path forward.
While we keep talking about some things coming up, I'm going to invite our 3 student ambassadors, Ella, Janai, and Joseph. Did I say them all right? Okay. To pass out cards with questions, if you have any questions, and then you can just hold them up and they'll collect them and bring them up to us as we're going here. And then, so fun stuff coming up, and as you know, the Olympics are going to be in LA in 2028. In Pasadena, we have 2 really big marquee events. At the Rose Bowl, the men's and women's soccer finals will be, semifinals and finals?
That's correct.
Will be at the Rose Bowl. Big deal. Also, as of just a couple of weeks ago, diving will be at the Rose Bowl Aquatic Center. So we're going to see a lot of action in our city, maybe a little disruption in our city, but thoughts about where we are with that? And is LA 28 really going to pull all this off?
I sure hope so. We're working hard with them. But I'll tell you, when I think about what you just said, those of you who've been to RBAC, the Aquatic Center, more than anything, it's just so beautiful when you look out and you see the surrounding mountains. So you can only imagine when the drones go up there, or whoever they do, I don't know how they do it, but they always show the venue from afar. And I think it's going to make Pasadena just look so amazing. I've already talked to my team about how we have to clean up a little bit and make sure the trees are perfectly trimmed and grass is green and it looks nice for when millions of eyes are going to be on us. But yeah, we're working hard on both fronts, diving and soccer, and even next door to us in Arcadia, they're going to have equestrian events at Santa Anita. So, in 2028, it's going to be here before we know it. We'll be ready. For us, it's kind of funny. Everyone else is kind of anxious about it, but we do this all the time,
right.
Thankfully. We just did Club World Cup. We do the Rose Bowl. We do the parade. We're kind of used to it, so it's not as big a deal for us, and I think we're going to shine.
I always think the Rose Bowl is one of the reasons our city, we're a small city, really, right? But somehow everybody knows Pasadena in the world, and it's because of the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl. And the idea that view is going to be splashed all over everyone's television is great for our city and for economic development. So couldn't be more excited about it. And I'm maybe a little more nervous than other people. There's still a lot to figure out, I think, about traffic management. Status of the Central Library rebuild, we on the way?
We are on the way. We have entered into contracts. They have fenced it off. They put some artwork on it the other day, and we're going to demolish what we need to demolish carefully. They're numbering it. It's historic. The price tag was a little bit high on it, $195 million. It's because we have to keep it historic. But my only wish is that it could be done even faster, because that building turns 100 years old in 2027. And right now the timeline shows we'll cut the ribbon in 2028. So it'll be 101. We'll see if we can make up some time. It'd be just terrific if we can get it for its 100th anniversary. But one thing I want to be clear on is, the Central Library, to me, we're gonna, somebody said, Lucy Jones, actually from Caltech across the street, said in 100 years, this is before we had passage of the bond, in 100 years you'll either have a library that will have been retrofit to last for 100 years, or you will have rubble. Because we know we're going to have an earthquake in the next 100 years that will take it down if it's not retrofit. So you look at, we know now we're going to retrofit it, what are we going to have? And essentially, we don't know where the exchange of information, the exchange of knowledge, how it's going to come about. So we're going to have this beautiful historic building that's 100 years old, wired up so that however information exchange evolves, however community gathering evolves, it'll be there for us to decide together, collectively, how to make best use of that incredible space.
You mentioned a little bit ago our fiscal situation. So how are we? We are, I will say, an incredibly well-run city, and our finances have been strong and balanced for a long time, but how are we looking right now?
Yeah, we have, our reserves are full, which is good, and that actually helps us in many ways, mostly when we take out debt. For example, as voters, you all approved a bond, and that's terrific. So we're going to get the library redone. But when we go out and issue those bonds, we get a lower interest rate because our credit rating is very high. And so we have our reserves are fully booked. And we did use the reserves for COVID, but we paid it back. We're back to square one. You know, the fires took another chunk out of us. We didn't have to use reserves, and we're hoping that FEMA comes through and gives us the reimbursement we deserve. But right now, we're stable. I think the challenge going forward is expenses are rising faster than revenues. And the reason for that is you all know your own, you know, personal situations. Insurance rates are going through the roof every year. Every year it's, you know, in the double digits of increases. Healthcare, we pay for our employees' healthcare, and we know those rates are going up faster than inflation. We also know that pursuant to Prop 13 that passed in 1978 and its progeny, you know, you look at assessed valuation, and as long as you don't move, you only go up 2%. We know inflation vastly exceeds, and the cost of insurance and the cost of healthcare vastly exceeds 2%. So most of our money comes, the general fund money where we have discretion comes from property tax. That's always going to be capped at 2% plus change of ownership and new construction. And sales tax, which is, you know, whenever the economy's down, sales tax revenues are down, that really hurts us. So, you know, one of the ideas for revenue generation is, frankly, we have the 710 stub, if you're familiar with it. For decades and decades and decades, folks fought the 710 coming up and connecting up with the 210. And now Caltrans in August of 2022 gave us that land back. And we're still in the process of designing and master planning it. But I can assure you there will be, well, I shouldn't say that because we have to wait for it to come to the council, but plans include and ideas include having housing there. We've heard that a lot. People want housing, and with new housing, you of course get new property tax revenues, and hopefully that'll be good revenue generation to keep the services that you all rely on available to you in good ways without additional.
The timeline on that, I think, is the recommendation from the Citizen Commission will, for kind of how to think about developing the 710 property, are supposed to come to us early in 2026, probably in February, with two kind of broad thoughts about how to develop it. My guess is, looking at what they're talking about now in their land use committee, it'll be some mix of open space and housing and some commerce, because something's got to pay for it all. But I'm excited to see what they come back to us with, and then we'll figure all that out. Okay, I got a bunch of questions. You ready? Yep. This is all of what we talked about so far. He knew was coming. But here we go.
That's true.
I'm going to throw you a softball first. How many police officers are in Pasadena now, and are there openings? 200. What's our number?
234. It's very good.
234.
And we have 239 authorized, 234 budgeted. So there's 5 that are unbudgeted. And that's because, you know, it's tough to fill police positions these days. We're doing way better than, say, Los Angeles, that has thousands of vacancies. We have a handful. And yeah, but what we do feel we need more officers. We just don't have the funding for it. And the reason we don't fund more now is because we can't fill them anyway. But frankly, when I look at it, and I'm told over and over again, we need more traffic officers. Is that one of your questions?
It's question number 2. So at last night, one of the things we did at last night's council meeting was welcome the 16 newest sworn officers, all young and looking kind of like wide-eyed, and so happy to be here. And it was exciting to see that many new police officers joining the force. The next question was, we see an increase of poor driving habits. What's being done to stop that? So the traffic calming on the greenways is one of the ways we're looking to stop that. I have felt for a while that we're under-enforced. We have a relatively small traffic team at the police department because there are just not that many resources to go around. But thoughts about this and about how we make people drive more nicely?
Yeah, I do think there's an important enforcement role to play. I will say this, that I've been told, and I've mostly come, because you know, come from counties. Counties don't really do that kind of work. It's more of a city work. But I've heard over and over and over again that people will say, we need more traffic enforcement. Then they get a ticket and they say, wait, why am I getting a ticket? That's not fair. So be careful what you ask for. But I do think in reality, we need not just enforcement, but we need smart design and engineering, speed humps where they're appropriate, all of the different treatments you can put on a street that will keep people going slow enough And I've learned already, in my time here that I think a lot of people, they want people to go slow in front of their house and in their community, but they want to be able to find that street to get where they're going real fast. And that's going to be a constant tension that I think we should all be mindful of. And I go back to what I mentioned earlier, where we can't talk past each other. We need to talk with each other and confront those complexities and come up with the right balance.
I would gently invite you. I often observe that people always think traffic problems and speed problems are something someone else is or someone else is doing, but all of us are out there on the road. And so please do try to pay attention to your own habits. It can be hard when you're out there.
And we did just talk about, I believe it's gone to the council or one of the committees, maybe MSC, a goal of 0 traffic fatalities by, now I can't remember if it's 2035 or 2038, but
right.
That's going to include a lot of engineering solutions, a lot of treatments, and a lot of investment to keep you all safe.
Just a few weeks ago, we made it easier to get speed humps on your street as well. So if you're interested in that, we lowered the threshold of car trips required and also changed the way that the vote on the street happens to get more participation. So we're aware of it and paying attention. What are your views on SB 79? And how will Pasadena plan ahead? SB 79 is a bill that is sitting on the governor's desk right now that would allow for a radius, is it a quarter-mile radius? Or for a radius around transit stops, so all of the train lines. It basically overrides all local zoning for development of residential property, which has been the state's thing for the last 10 years or so, overriding local zoning. So it could allow, at the worst scenario, a very dense 9-story building to be built within a quarter mile of Fillmore Station or the Lake Station or the Del Mar Station. And so we desperately need housing. I'd like to say that every time this subject comes up. We do desperately need housing, and we need housing that is affordable at all income levels. But you also have to plan a city. And the idea of doing away with zoning for housing is I think, senseless. That's my 2 cents on it. But thoughts about SB 79?
Yeah, I agree with you with the priority. We need more housing. I think we all can see it. It's pretty obvious. But there are 488 cities in California, and they're so different from one another. And I think to be in Sacramento and say a one-size-fits-all, you all have to do this, doesn't make sense. And it doesn't give credit to cities like Pasadena that take its obligation seriously, that has done so much on housing, including we have a 20% set aside of affordable housing for every development that's made of multi-unit housing. So we're a leader in the space, but we get treated just like everybody else, and especially having 6 metro stops in the city, because it all goes around, that's where you have the exemptions. You're going to see a lot more housing that's a lot higher. That's going to be by right. So we've lost local control on that. But that's one of the reasons we need a ladder truck, right? Because there might be a fire on the 8th floor. Yeah. How are we going to get to it? But you see how we should be planning for this in the local level and trying to do it right instead of having a state law that tells us how to do it. But we don't have a choice. If the governor signs it, we need to adapt and make the best of it.
How is tree trimming going? Took weeks to get downed limbs from a city tree. That should not happen. So in the future, if everyone will first download the CSC app, which is the City Service Center app, and you can put in the request yourself, or you can email Pam or me, and we will talk to the city. That turnaround should be fast, and if it's going on for longer than a day or two, that's a gap in the system that we need to jump, but it shouldn't go long, because typically it goes pretty well.
It usually goes really quickly, and sometimes people, when I hear about it, I reach out to them. Now I'm their boss, but I say, hey, this is going on, and this hasn't been done. Usually by the end of the day or the next morning, I'll get an email, oh, it's done, it's taken care of. So sometimes there's just process gaps, and we try to fix them, but by and large, it gets done quickly.
And again, if you're seeing it there for longer, let us know, and we'll nudge as well. Okay, this one's more for me. What's the status of the 7-story building proposed for South Catalina Avenue? 615 South Catalina is an empty lot just south of California on Catalina, across from the Polytechnic School. It's the first lot behind the condos that face California. There's an application to build, it's zoned single family, but there's an application to build I think it's 6 stories now. They reduced it a little. 6-story, I don't know the last number of units they proposed, 60 something, I think. In 6 stories is a lot of units, but on that lot, relying on a relatively obscure state law called the Builder's Remedy. That is in litigation now, so I can't say a lot about it. The hearing is anticipated to be in December. If you want to know more, come talk to me. Oh, great question. Will Pasadena-Altadena residents be given some special opportunity to purchase Olympic tickets to Pasadena events like soccer and diving?
Interesting suggestion. All we have right now with LA 28 is what we call a city agreement. And because we're a host city, and now they're going to do the venue agreements, one with RBOC, one the operating company for the Rose Bowl, one with RBAC, the Rose Bowl Aquatic Center, and we will see what they come up with. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting question, and I will pass on to my team to explore that idea.
On the 710 study, back to that, what are measures or steps taken to ensure that Pasadena receives the accurate and comprehensive financial analysis from the consultants, and what are the funding sources contemplated so far? We're so early we don't even have a conceptual framework, so the financial analysis will follow that, and then the how to pay for it analysis will follow that, I think, is probably the right sequence.
That's right, but we already have hired a consultant to help us work on that financial analysis. We're looking at things like what they call tax increment financing, or EIFDs, enhanced infrastructure financing districts. We're looking at the whole gamut of different financing tools that are available, and have some of the best people on board. And I think there'll be some discussion of that on October 20th. We're going to go to the City Council and make a presentation and give an update, a comprehensive update on what we call the 710 stub, and that'll include some financing information.
And of course, there's a lot of ways to do it. We own that property. We could sell that property. I think right now the preference is very strongly that the city keeps that property as city property and does long-term land leases, which will then put some of the development responsibility on the other side. But I will look forward to that presentation. That one's hard to read. Oh, how do you intend on increasing business in Pasadena and maintaining existing ones? We have not talked about economic development much.
Yeah, we are blessed to have a very good economic development team. They reside within my office, the city manager's office, and they are every day out there talking to our business partners, looking at different ways. I guess a good example would be that COVID was really tough on our businesses here in Pasadena. We did so much to work with them, to change our regulatory schemes, to allow for outdoor dining. We got what they call, they used to call them earmarks, now they call them congressionally directed spending, but we got $1.5 million from Judy Chu, and we gave that out to restaurants so they could put more what they call parklets out there that are more uniform looking. With life sciences, we see that as a big future for Pasadena. And we talked to them, and they told us, hey, the way we do business, your regulations on some hazardous substances doesn't work for us. Well, we said, we got to keep people safe. What can we do? We listened to them. They made some proposals. We put that in front of the council, and they enacted those proposals. So some changes in regulations to help those businesses we'd like to attract come here. So it comes in a variety of forms, but I think the basis of it is talking to our businesses, hearing their needs, and doing our level best to address the complexity of the problems they present to us so that they come and join us and add to our tax base, add to the businesses we can enjoy, and become part of our community.
How's our hotel occupancy tax revenue and revenue from tourism in general?
That's actually been really high. In part, it spiked, believe it or not, because of the fires. as soon as the fires happened, people needed to go to stay in hotels, and insurance proceeds pay for it. And so we had really high occupancy and really high receipts on transit occupancy tax, TOT revenues. That's sort of stabilized, but thankfully it's back. We're not seeing the same level of now I'm forgetting which one it is. There's business travel, and then there's people that just come and visit. And one of them has dropped, and one of them has increased, and I forget which one. So my apologies. But in the end, there's a Seinfeld episode. Everything balances out. It's kind of like that. Everything balances out, so we're stable in that realm. But certainly want to look at whichever one is down and see if we can get it back up to what it once was.
Couple of questions, probably, I think, rolling off of last night. One of the things that came up last night was I mentioned that there was a contract for an outreach firm to do outreach around the greenways to get public input. And that was a competitive bidding process, and a firm based in, in Chino Hills was selected over a firm based in Pasadena. We do have a scoring preference for locally owned businesses, but they don't always come out on top out of the whole scoring. Thoughts about local hiring? We had a big conversation about this last night, a little bit in the meeting and then also after the meeting. And I know this is a passionate commitment of Councilmember Hampton, but thoughts on local hiring and how to increase it.
Yeah, we do a lot. You want to keep your tax dollars within the community. So there is a policy. We do what the council has decided in terms of implementing their policy, and that does give, out of 100 points, 5 if you're a local business and 5 more if you're a small business. So you get 10 points extra if you're both. And then you have to have, though, in a competitive process, a matrix, an evaluation matrix, and you do in good faith look at their experience and their expertise in this area, and on and on and on. And we try to put our best professionals within we have about 2,400 employees. So you try to create a good evaluation matrix, and you put your best experts on it. And we ask them to just do their level best and rate the proposals, and then we bring that to the council. But built into the process is a preference for local vendors, and we'll continue to implement that and even have more policy discussions with the council about it.
Having said that, I often see that we have a local bidder who doesn't end up on top of the scoring. So I did ask last night that we bring this to economic development to look at, maybe we change the scoring matrix. Can we increase the points we give to local? Because it is important both for the expertise and understanding our community, particularly on something like an outreach contract, but for keeping the dollars here, right? Just in terms of local revenue. So we will continue to look at it and see if we can tweak that system at least. Talk about impending pension costs and their impact. I think we're looking okay on this front right now, but you tell me.
Yeah, for years and years, somehow we are what's called a contract city. So we contract with CalPERS, so we don't invest our own pension proceeds, and we're reliant on them. And for years and years and years, if the stock market went up 20%, they'd go up 3 or something. And I'm probably exaggerating, but this past year, we were very worried, especially when tariffs hit, and they reported that they lost billions and billions of dollars, but then the stock market came back, and they actually did better than they had forecasted. So yeah, you're right. We now none of that inures to our benefit right away because it's all smoothed over time, but it certainly means that we're not facing this impending pension crisis. And we were, public sector pensions used to be much richer, and they were having cities throughout the state go bankrupt. So in 2013, they passed PEPRA, which is the Public Employee Pension Reform Act, if I had to guess. And they changed, you have to work longer and you get less. But it was done out of necessity. And, in Pasadena now, we're more than 50% are what we call PEPRA people. So it's kind of unfair in some ways because you have people working side to side. One person makes a higher pension, one makes a lower. Everyone hired after January 1st, 2013 is now under PEPRA, and they're getting a pension that they contribute more to and they take less from, so it's sustainable in the long term. And so we'll get that under control.
Yeah. We also have the Pasadena Fire and Police Retirement System Board. That is a closed system that ended in 1978, I think. And there are still fewer than 100, I think
100,
now. People in that system, but it's doing great and doing well. And the city would have an obligation to fill in funds for that, but every year the actuary puts that year out that we might have to contribute funds further out. So it's doing well as well. Back to the 28 Olympics. Any volunteer opportunities? Do we have anybody working on this or thinking about it from our perspective? It's an interesting question.
I don't think we're at the point of looking at volunteers yet because it is more than, 2.5, 3 years out. But you remind me, we do have a committee headed up by Mike Ross from the Pasadena Center Operating Committee, PCOC, who runs the convention, and then David Klug, our Director of Economic Development, and they're looking for various ways to leverage the Olympics for business purposes, for business development, to help our hotels, our restaurants, everybody else. I will bring to them the idea of how do you guys work volunteers into everything we're doing in Pasadena to get ready for LA 28.
This one's maybe a little bit more for me, although you know about this as well. But what's happening with the Caltech construction plan for Green Street at Holliston? Any way to affect the 3-story to underground design? So Caltech has proposed to build a 3-story building at the corner of Holliston and Green as a research and development facility. It is by right under the Pasadena Code. The height and building standards of the building have been in the code for many years. The research and development use became by right, I think, in the when we passed the East Pasadena specific plan several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So it is all by right. So the building design, the building standards, so the size, the shape, are not under the city's discretion. All design in Pasadena is under the city's discretion. I'm looking at our district's design commissioner right now. So you can affect the look of the building, and you also may be able to lobby Caltech for changes to the building. But in terms of the city's role in that process, it'll be limited to the look of the building, the materials, the style, making sure it's contextually in keeping with what's around it, and those kind of things. Is the Pasadena Rental Housing Board and Department getting organized? Who created the registry? It's very cumbersome. This is not the first time we've heard this.
It's getting there. The Measure H is what created the rent board, and that was, if my memory serves, it was November of 22.
22, correct.
And it took a little while to get everything together. It's hard to create something from scratch, but we've done it, and a board has been appointed in accordance with what the charter amendment required. And we have a director, and we have a department, and they have a house, or they're housed in at 199 South Los Robles. That's where their office is. So all that's been set up. The registry, we're not the first city to have rent stabilization, and so we used the vendor that created it already for somebody else, and we tweaked it for Pasadena. I will pass on the comment that it is cumbersome. I do think there's a lot happening there. As I mentioned, I was on the Court of Appeal in the 6th District back from 2012 to 2016. So I'm familiar with that process, and we recently went to the Court of Appeal because the California Apartment Association, I think, sued the city about Measure H. Even though it was done by initiative, it wasn't really a city measure, but it was done by proponents who brought signatures and put it on the ballot. In any event, they had oral argument, and then it was submitted. And when the court submits it, what they did a neat thing, is they said, if you don't issue an opinion in 90 days, then you don't get paid. So once they take it under submission, it means they're ready to issue a ruling. So it was taken under submission, and then they vacated submission, which is really unusual. And they vacated submission, and they asked some specific questions. There's some articles in the paper about this. And the specific question they asked had to do with the relocation fees that are part of what has been enacted under Measure H. And they're asking the question, are relocation fees one of the, quote, basis for eviction that cities are allowed to regulate? So that's going to be the legal question. I don't know the answer to it. I can tell you the California Apartment Association says, no, it's not a basis for eviction. It's a relocation fee. And, you know, the lawyers on the other side are saying, no, that's a basis for eviction, and it's part and parcel of eviction. So they just, maybe last week, took it under submission again, so we will know the answer in 90 days or less, and then we'll pivot and we'll see what, how the Court of Appeal rules. But it's in flux. It's been a challenge. You know, from a fiscal perspective, what's good is I just talked to the head of the department this morning, and she told me that our collection of revenue is pretty good. I think we collected $4.8 million. We were trying to get 5.1 to meet expenses, so we're $300,000 short. But in the grand scheme, that's not a huge amount when you think about those numbers. And we'll make adjustments to make sure that it's fully funded and doesn't take from the city's general fund.
So I'm committed to starting on time and ending on time, and we said we'd be done at 7:30, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But I got a question. I was going to ask you a different last question, and the one that just came up I love. What is one surprising thing about Pasadena you have learned since you started and you love? Which I think is great. No pressure.
Yeah, the part that gets me of when you started, I think I knew it, but I didn't fully appreciate it, is how, you know, I came here saying there are all the component parts in Pasadena, the people, the institutions, the history, to really build a model city for other people to emulate and make the world a better place. I mean, that's my idealistic way of thinking through why I do the work that I do. And then I came here and I actually went, you know, I have to go to a lot of events, you know, it's just part of the job. And it was a Friday night, and I went to an event for someone who was on the board at Carnegie Mellon, but was celebrating that Anthony Portantino, our former state senator, got them $20 million for a facility. And I said, okay, I'll go, and it's for Anthony, and you know, you do your thing. But I'll be truthful, I was trying to get home. I was tired. It was the end of a long week. And then they started making their speeches, and they were speeches, and that's great, and people have very talented people here. But then the smarty pants people from Caltech and Carnegie Mellon started talking about the origins of the universe and everything we've done from here in Pasadena. I couldn't walk away. I was just fascinated like a kid. And you start to realize, wow, I'm the city manager of this city where so much of our history was born, and our understanding of the universe just, I think it was about 100 years ago or something like that, that we looked at telescopes from here and realized, hey, wait a minute, there's not just one galaxy, there's a universe. We discovered the universe. And that's really special, but you see that over and over and over, whether it's, you know, what is it, Art College of Design? I can't remember the exact name. Art Center College of Design. And we design almost every vehicle in the world here in Pasadena. There's just so many different special pieces of it that I kind of had the hope maybe that I would find that in Pasadena. And I think coming here now, I think someone said it must have been the gravitational pull of the center of the universe that brought me here. But it surpassed my expectations.
Who might have said that about Pasadena?
Yeah, but it's blown away my expectations. And I just feel tremendous pride to be your city manager in this incredible city.
Well, thank you for taking the time. As you know, my admiration for you is enormous. And we are blessed and lucky to have this guy as our leader. So thank you.